My husband, Richard, tried to adopt some other woman's kid right after my affair with that fresh-faced newbie at work blew up in my face. I can still see the day clearly. We were in our Upper East Side living room, the afternoon light hitting the worn leather of the armchairs, when Richard dropped the bomb about having a son. 30 years married and suddenly, out of nowhere, a kid. He said it with the same flat affect he used for work. He was a forensic accountant, all about numbers and facts, not feelings, or when he talked about his stamp collection of all things. But his eyes, though, they had this spark, a flicker I hadn't seen in ages. The kicker? The kid wasn't even ours. Yet, Richard wanted him like he'd always yearned for a child. Turns out, I wasn't the only one playing a double game, chasing something to shake up the same old routine. I thought I was the queen of secret lives, juggling stolen moments with young Ethan, the intern, while keeping up appearances. But Richard had his own hidden world. His connection with this woman, Delia, had morphed into something huge, and now he was dragging her son into our lives, carving out space in his heart for a kid who was a complete stranger. Was this payback? Did he know about Ethan, about the way his easy charm and youthful energy had filled a void I hadn't even acknowledged until he showed up? Or was it worse than revenge? Had Richard simply found someone, something better than me? The twist? Thomas, the kid, isn't even Richard's. Biologically, he's not his at all. Thomas is Delia's son, a woman Richard met through a case, who'd somehow turned his head in a way I hadn't seen in decades. He was acting like he was 20 again, reckless, impulsive. All I knew was Richard was dead set on giving this kid a home, our home, and he wasn't about to let me stand in his way. But I'm not the type to just sit back and watch my life unravel without digging into every single thread. I have my secrets, sure, but Richard is no saint either. If he thinks he can hide anything from me, from the woman who has loved and loathed him in equal measure for 3 decades, he's about to learn a hard lesson. For every lie he tries to bury, I'll dig twice as deep. Because in this city, in this marriage, the truth is the only currency that matters. And sometimes, love and hate are so intertwined you can barely tell them apart. 30 years. 30 years everyone in our building, in our circle, called goals. I heard it all the time at the Met, where I curated ancient artifacts. You two are so lucky, they'd say. Lucky like luck was all it took to build a life with a man who rationed out pieces of himself so sparingly. Richard was a good man, the way a plain bagel is good. He did his duty, paid the bills, and remembered our anniversary more often than not. Reliable, like the grandfather clock in the hall, that ticking monument he adored for reasons I never grasped. It was the kind of dependable life most women craved. But I wasn't most women. A year ago, in a surge of something, longing, defiance, I started seeing Ethan. Ethan, 30 years younger, joined the museum as an exhibits manager, bursting with energy, ambition. It wasn't just his looks, though he was handsome in that raw, untamed way young guys are. No, it was his genuine interest in my work, his easy laugh, the way he looked at me. Not as some middle-aged curator, but as a person, a woman. It started small, coffee dates, a brush of hands. Then before I knew it, it had exploded into something undeniable. Months into my affair with Ethan, Richard started acting different. Distant, but not in a way I could put my finger on. His late nights at the office became more frequent, his conversations shorter, clipped. At first, I thought he'd finally sensed something. Part of me even hoped he had, that he'd confront me, force me to choose. But Richard wasn't wired that way. Confrontation was too messy, too human. No, whatever was distracting him had nothing to do with me, or so I thought. One evening, during our usual silent dinner ritual, he cleared his throat. "Beth," he said, using that old nickname, the one that now felt like a relic from another life. "I've been helping someone, a woman I met through work. She has a little boy." I laughed, a hollow sound that bounced off the dining room walls. "Helping? You mean charity work?" "No," he said, looking at me with those eyes that never gave away more than he wanted. I'm taking care of them. Thomas, the boy, he's going to need a father." I felt the blood drain from my face. A father? Was he actually saying what I thought he was saying? I stared at him, speechless. This was Richard, the king of emotional restraint, casually announcing he intended to be a father to some other woman's child. Not a mentor, not a friend, a father. And the way he said it, like it was the most normal thing in the world. It was like someone had swapped my husband with an alien. "What are you talking about?" I managed, my voice sharper than intended. He held my gaze, steady, unreadable. "It's complicated, Beth. Delia. She's going through a lot. I've known her for months now. She's young, barely making it, and Thomas doesn't have anyone else. Delia. The name hung in the air like a bad smell. And what exactly are you to her, Richard? I asked, masking the hurt with sarcasm. Her white knight? Or something more? Beth, he replied, his calm infuriating. I know this is difficult to understand, but I've grown close to them both. They're part of my life now. His words sliced through the silence. For the first time in years, I felt real rage, the nerve of him, sitting there confessing to... what exactly? An affair? A whole new family? I wanted to scream, demand answers, but something held me back. A thought, cold and sharp. Does he know about Ethan? So I swallowed my questions, my hurt, my fury. I'd get to the bottom of this. If he thought he could flip my life upside down so casually, he had another thing coming. Over the next few weeks, Richard's behavior got even stranger. Weekends were spent helping Delia, running errands, fixing things at her place in Queens. He was living a double life, and I was just a ghost in one of them. Meanwhile, I tried to keep up my own charade with Ethan, meeting in secret, pretending nothing had changed. But now, every touch, every whispered word was tainted with doubt. Was I any better than Richard? Or was he somehow worse? One afternoon, after a particularly brutal museum board meeting, I found myself in the gallery storage room with Ethan. He reached out, his hand warm against my cheek. For a moment, I let myself forget. But then he looked at me, his eyes filled with a concern that seemed to see right through me. Is everything okay, Beth? He asked, his voice soft but insistent. You seem distracted lately. I wanted to tell him everything, to spill the whole mess about Richard and Delia, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain that my husband had a second family he was building, while I was living a lie of my own? Instead, I deflected, laughing it off. Just work. Nothing I can't handle. But I could tell he didn't believe me, and somehow that made it all worse. My chance to meet Delia came sooner than I expected. One evening, Richard announced he was bringing her and Thomas over for dinner. They're like family to me now, he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Family? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Richard, we've been married for 30 years. We are supposed to be family. He didn't flinch. They're important to me, Beth. I'd like you to meet them. So I played along, smiling tight as he set the table, fussing over details he'd never cared about before. The night arrived, and Delia walked in, carrying Thomas. A small, dark-haired kid with eyes that seemed way too old for his age. Delia was younger than I'd imagined, maybe late 20s, with a quiet, reserved air. She looked at me with polite caution, like she was sizing up the competition. I scrutinized her back, searching for whatever had captivated Richard so completely. Thomas, oblivious to the tension, squirmed in her arms, reaching for a wooden toy Richard had placed on the table. Watching him laugh as Richard made faces felt surreal. This child, this tiny stranger, had somehow wormed his way into our lives without my permission. Over dinner, I tried to make small talk, asking Delia about her work, her life. She answered politely, but I could sense something beneath the surface, something she was holding back. Richard, meanwhile, couldn't stop doting on her, filling her plate, asking if she needed anything. It was like I was invisible. At one point, when Richard stepped out of the room, Delia leaned in, her voice barely audible. I know this is hard for you, Beth, but Richard, he cares about Thomas and me, and I won't stand in the way of that. Her words hit like a punch. Won't stand in the way? I repeated, forcing a smile. You're the one who brought him here. She looked down, her expression unreadable. I didn't ask for this, but Richard, he insisted. Something in the way she said it made me pause. Was Delia as much a victim in this as I was, or was she playing Richard, manipulating him with that carefully crafted vulnerability? Either way, one thing was clear, she was here to stay, and Richard would do anything to keep her and that kid close. In the following weeks, I started digging into Delia's background. I learned she worked at a community center in Harlem, doing admin stuff. Her coworkers described her as sweet, dedicated, a young mom just trying to get by. But I knew there had to be more. No one just waltzes into a man's life and takes over like this without leaving a trace. In my search for answers, I found an unlikely ally in Lorraine, a society lady on the museum board who knew everyone and everything in this city. Lorraine lived for gossip. When I confided in her about Richard's sudden obsession with adoption, she practically vibrated with excitement. Delia, you say? Lorraine leaned forward, eyes gleaming. That name rings a bell. I'm sure I've heard something. Over the next week, Lorraine worked her network, dropping into conversations, fishing for information. When she finally called with news, it was both more and less than I expected. Turns out, Lorraine said, her voice dripping with intrigue, our dear Delia was involved in some questionable business a few years back. Nothing too scandalous, mind you, but there were whispers about her hanging with a certain crowd, dealing with less than legitimate money exchanges. She paused for effect. Kept her nose clean, though. Nothing ever stuck. Her words hung in the air, a sinister possibility forming in my mind. What if Delia was using Richard, exploiting his midlife crisis, his need to feel young and important for some hidden agenda? And what if Thomas was part of the con? I thanked Lorraine, her words echoing in my head as I went home. Richard was out, as usual, with Delia and Thomas. I paced the empty apartment, thoughts swirling. I needed proof, something solid to expose Delia for whatever she was hiding. If she thought she could waltz into my husband's life and take over, she was dead wrong. I'd fight fire with fire, and this time I wouldn't be the one left in the dark. The day after my talk with Lorraine, I woke up with a new purpose. Years of watching Richard with his cases had taught me how to investigate. Quietly, discreetly. I was no stranger to secrets, after all. But this time, it wasn't my secrets I was protecting. I started small. Richard kept a locked drawer in his study for case files. I knew going through his stuff was risky, but if Delia was tied to one of his investigations, the answers might be there. One evening, after he left for some late meeting, I took my chance. I found the spare key hidden in a book, my heart pounding as I unlocked the drawer. Inside, files were stacked neatly, labeled with dates and handwritten notes in Richard's meticulous script. I scanned names, places, dates, searching for anything connected to Delia. Finally, I found it. A slim file labeled Thomas Weston. I paused. Richard had a file on Thomas. Inside were sparse documents, birth records, background checks, financial statements. One thing jumped out. Delia had once lived upstate, a fact she'd conveniently left out. 2 police reports were attached, each dated 5 years back, listing her as an associate of a man involved in fraud. Vague details, but enough to ignite my suspicions. What if Richard had stumbled across Delia during a case, found her in some mess, and let sympathy or lust cloud his judgment? And what if Delia had been looking for exactly that? Someone like Richard, who could offer her a way out, financial stability, a steady hand. I barely heard the front door open, Richard's footsteps on the stairs. I slammed the drawer shut, slipped out of the study, my pulse racing. If Richard knew I'd seen that file, he'd lock me out for good. But now I had what I needed, a connection, a reason to dig deeper. The next day, I couldn't focus at work. The museum felt suffocating, the air thick with secrets, like my own. I texted Ethan, asking him to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. I needed to talk to someone I could trust, even if just a little. Ethan arrived, looking as worried as he sounded in his texts. He'd always been perceptive, and I realized he'd sensed the shift in me even before I fully understood it myself. "You look like you haven't slept," he said softly, reaching across the table, touching my hand. Everything's falling apart, Ethan. I hadn't planned to tell him everything, but he needed to understand why I'd been distant, why our connection, however real it was, suddenly felt like just another layer of the mess I'd created. He leaned in, his voice quiet, serious. "Yeah, I know you're going through something, but if you're in trouble, if you need help, I'm here." I took a deep breath, and before I could stop myself, I was telling him about Delia. I didn't mention Richard's file, not yet. But I told him about Delia's sudden appearance, Richard's obsession, her son, Thomas. I even hinted at my suspicions about Delia's motives. Ethan's face darkened. "So, you think she's using him?" "I don't know what to think anymore," I admitted, "but something doesn't add up. And Richard, he's just going along with it, blind to everything." Ethan frowned, a strange look coming over his face. "Beth, there's something I need to tell you." My heart stopped. The way he looked down at his hands, the hesitation in his voice, it felt like he was about to drop a bomb. "I know Delia," he finally said, his voice low. "A couple of years ago. It wasn't serious, but we crossed paths." He paused. "I don't know if she remembers, but she has a history of latching onto men who can provide for her. She knows how to get what she wants." The room seemed to spin. Ethan, the one person I thought I could confide in, had known Delia all along. A surge of anger, betrayal washed over me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? He looked away, guilt etched across his face. I didn't think it mattered, not until now. So, Delia had a pattern. She'd done this before, sought out men who could protect her, offer stability. And now she'd found the perfect mark in Richard. The pieces were clicking into place, and the picture they painted was darker than I'd imagined. Armed with this new information, I decided it was time to confront Delia directly. She was working her shift at the community center that afternoon. I knew she'd be alone. When I arrived, I found her in the back office, sorting through papers. She looked up, surprised, but quickly composed herself, giving me that placid, unreadable look I was starting to hate. "Beth," she said, her voice smooth, steady. "What a surprise." I didn't waste time with the pleasantries. "I know what you're doing, Delia. I know your history. And I know you're manipulating Richard." Her expression didn't change, but a flicker of something, annoyance, flashed in her eyes. "I'm not sure what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "You've done this before, haven't you? Latching onto men who can help you, who fall for the poor single mother routine." She tilted her head, a small, almost mocking smile playing on her lips. "So, Richard told you everything, did he?" "No," I replied sharply. "He didn't have to. I found out for myself." For a moment, she just stared at me, her gaze unwavering. Then she laughed, a quiet, unsettling sound. "You're right. I've had my share of hard times. But Richard, he came to me. He wanted to be a part of Thomas's life. Who am I to turn away help?" The way she said it, like Richard was just another pawn in her game, made my blood boil. "You're playing with fire, Delia. If you think I'm going to let you walk away with everything I've built, you're mistaken." She leaned back, crossing her arms, a calm confidence that infuriated me. "Oh, Beth, you really don't know Richard at all, do you? He's tired of this life you two have built, this prison you've kept him in. He told me he feels alive with us, with Thomas." I wanted to slap that smug look off her face. Instead, I took a step back, letting her words sink in. Was it possible? Had Richard really been so miserable, so desperate to escape, that he'd seek out someone like Delia, someone with a child he could claim as his own? "You'll regret this," I hissed, my voice trembling. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." She simply shrugged, unbothered. "We'll see about that." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every word Delia had said echoed in my mind, chipping away at my confidence, feeding my doubts. Had I really pushed Richard away? Was this all my fault? Or was Delia just manipulating him, twisting his feelings to suit her needs? There was only one way to find out. I would confront Richard directly, but not with accusations, not with anger. I would lay everything out in the open, force him to see what was at stake. And if he still chose Delia, then I'd have nothing left to lose. That night, I lay awake, running my plan over and over. No accusations, no anger. Patience, openness. I would appeal to the man he once was, the one who had once cared for me, if he was still in there. I waited until Saturday evening, knowing he'd be home. The apartment was unusually quiet, just the city sounds filtering in through the windows. I set the table, a calm facade over a churning stomach. I knew Delia wouldn't be expecting him that night. She'd taken Thomas to see her sister upstate. Tonight, it would just be us. Richard arrived just as I finished lighting the candles. He looked tired, worn, and I saw a flicker of hesitation in his step when he saw the table set for two. "Is there an occasion?" he asked, his tone wary. I smiled, pretending to be at ease. "Just wanted to talk. Feels like we haven't had a real conversation in a long time." He gave a curt nod, looking around as if uncertain, but he sat down, waiting for me to speak. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Richard, I know things have changed between us, and I know you found other people who mean a lot to you." He didn't respond right away, his gaze steady, his face carefully blank. "It's not just that, Beth. It's the feeling of being alive again." I finished his sentence, watching his expression shift, caught off guard, his brows knitted together. "How did you—" "I met Delia," I replied calmly. "I've spoken to her. She made things very clear. She told me you're tired of us. Of me." I struggled to keep my voice level. "She said you feel alive with her." Richard's face softened, and for a moment he looked almost like the man I'd fallen in love with decades ago. "Beth, it's not that simple." "Then explain it to me," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "Make me understand." He hesitated, running a hand over his face. "Delia, she's different. She and Thomas. They remind me of things I'd forgotten. Life, it doesn't feel so predictable with them." Predictable. The words stung more than I expected. And do you love her? I asked, forcing myself to meet his gaze. Richard looked away. His silence spoke volumes. The reality settled like a stone in my gut. Richard was no longer fully mine. He hadn't been for a long time. But the shock quickly turned to something else. Determination. I couldn't let Delia just waltz in and take everything I'd spent decades building. This life, this apartment, it was as much mine as his. And I wouldn't let her dismantle it piece by piece. If she means so much to you, then why haven't you left? I demanded. Why string both of us along? Richard's jaw tightened. It's not that simple, Beth. You know how complicated things are. There's money, there's... He paused, choosing his words carefully. There's history. I gave a bitter laugh. History? That's what's keeping you here? He looked pained, but he didn't deny it. And that was enough to push me further. Richard, if you think you can build a life with her, go ahead, but I won't make it easy for you. My voice was steady, calm in a way I hadn't expected. I know things about her, things I'm sure you're not aware of. He narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about? Oh, don't act so surprised, I said, crossing my arms. You didn't think I'd just stand by, did you? Delia has a past that could jeopardize everything if you're not careful. I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a crack in his confidence. He knew I wouldn't bluff about something like this. And for the first time, I saw real fear in him. Fear that Delia might not be the innocent young woman he'd imagined. He didn't say anything that night, but I knew my words had hit home. In the days that followed, I watched him grow more distant, lost in thought. He was wondering, doubting, replaying my words, questioning every interaction with Delia. It was a small victory, but it felt like a lifeline. One evening, Richard left abruptly, saying he needed to clear his head. I waited until I was sure he was gone, then called Lorraine. I asked her to dig deeper into Delia's past, anything that would solidify my suspicions. Lorraine didn't disappoint. A few days later, she called, her tone urgent. Beth, there's more, she said, excitement lacing her voice. Delia isn't just some struggling single mom. She was involved with an older man, years ago, a sugar arrangement. Wealthy guy. She was his companion for a while. When he passed, there were rumors she benefited quite a bit from his will. I listened, the pieces clicking into place. It all made sense now. Her ability to play the victim, to attract men who could offer stability, all while hiding a past steeped in opportunism. With this new information, I knew it was time to strike. Richard had to see Delia for who she truly was. I arranged another dinner, just the two of us, bracing myself for the final showdown. Richard looked wary when he arrived. I wasted no time, handing him a folder containing everything Lorraine had dug up. Delia's past relationships, the rumors about the inheritance, even the police reports. Look at this, I said, my voice cold. This is the woman you've been protecting, the woman you've risked our life for. Do you still think she's so innocent? Richard's face drained of color as he flipped through the documents. His hands shook slightly, his eyes darting from page to page. I could see the realization dawning on him, the weight of it settling heavy. I didn't know, he murmured, almost to himself. I thought I was helping her. Helping her? I scoffed. Richard, you were being used. She saw your kindness, your generosity, and she exploited it, just like she's done to others. He looked up at me, a mix of shame and anger in his eyes. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Would you have believed me? I replied, crossing my arms. You were so convinced she was some kind of lost soul. I knew you wouldn't listen. He was silent, his face a storm of emotions. I could tell he was angry, maybe even at me for exposing the truth. But a part of him couldn't deny what he was reading. The days that followed were tense, silent. Richard withdrew further, spending hours locked in his study. I gave him space, watching him wrestle with the disillusionment. It wasn't long before Delia started calling the apartment, her voice desperate in message after message, pleading with Richard to talk to her, to explain his sudden disappearance. One evening, after the third missed call, I picked up. Delia's voice was raw, pleading. Richard, please, I don't know what happened. If you're mad at me, just tell me why. I thought we were a family. I listened, a strange satisfaction growing. When she paused, I spoke calmly, letting the bitterness seep through. Delia, it's Beth. Silence, then a sharp intake of breath. Beth, what are you doing answering Richard's phone? I think the question is, what are you doing calling my husband? I replied coldly. Her voice wavered. Beth, Please, I don't know what you told him, but I love him. I love him and Thomas. He thinks of Richard as his father. I held back a laugh. Is that so, or is it that you love what he can give you? She didn't respond. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head, scrambling for an answer. I could tell I'd hit a nerve. Stay away from him, Delia, I continued, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are and what you've done. She didn't answer. The silence spoke volumes. I hung up, a grim satisfaction settling over me. Richard eventually came to me, exhausted, his face etched with regret. He sat across from me in the living room, shoulders slumped. You were right, Beth, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I was blind. I thought I was helping her, that I was doing something meaningful. But you were right. I wanted to feel triumphant, but instead I just felt hollow, like I'd won a battle that didn't even matter anymore. Do you still love her? I asked, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. He looked away, shame crossing his face. I don't know what I feel anymore. We sat in silence, the weight of years and betrayals between us like a chasm. In the end, Richard stayed, not out of love, not even guilt, but out of a mutual understanding that we were bound together, trapped by shared secrets and shattered trust. And Delia? She left town soon after, taking Thomas with her, disappearing as quickly as she'd arrived. I never heard from her again. Neither did Richard. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if she ever thinks of us, the life she almost stole, the family she nearly destroyed. Or maybe, in the end, she was the one who truly saw us for what we were, a pair of lonely, desperate souls clinging to the ruins of a life we'd long since lost. Delia's exit left an eerie quiet in our lives. With her gone, the apartment felt cavernous, hollow. Even Richard, once so captivated by Delia's world, seemed adrift. The anchor he'd sought in her ripped away. Our lives settled into a strange routine, a quiet partnership. But beneath the calm surface simmered bitterness, regret, resignation, bound by secrets, shared history, the wreckage we'd created. Richard withdrew further, a ghost in his own home, spending hours staring out the window, lost in thought. Disillusionment ate at him, the realization he'd been deceived, thrown away years of stability for an illusion. He'd gambled on something new, meaningful, only to find lies. One evening, passing his study, I saw him alone, hands gripping his chair, exhaustion lining his face. He looked up, and for the first time in months, spoke without pretense. I'm sorry, Beth, he murmured, regret thick in his voice. For everything, for being so blind, for hurting you. I held his gaze, a mix of sympathy and anger. You didn't just hurt me, Richard. You almost tore us apart. For what? A fantasy. He nodded, pain etched on his face. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought I could find something with her that I'd lost. Something I thought we'd lost. The honesty stung. We'd both searched outside our marriage, me with Ethan, him with Delia. But where I'd been discreet, Richard had risked everything, blind to consequences. Maybe, I replied slowly, we lost it because we stopped looking for it here. Days followed, a routine of shared silence, unspoken truths. We were bound, if only by default. We knew there was no going back, yet neither was willing to leave. A strange comfort in each other's faults, resignation to flaws we knew too well. One evening at dinner, I broke the silence. So what now, Richard? We just go on like this? Pretend none of it happened? He looked at me, sadness in his eyes. Maybe. Or maybe we just accept it. Accept that this is where we've ended up. The thought settled heavily. Acceptance, not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but grudging acceptance of who we were, what we'd done. Not what I'd imagined marriage to be, but maybe all we had left. Weeks passed, days colder, winter creeping in. One gray afternoon, tidying up, a knock. Unexpected, Richard at work. Cautiously, I peered through the window. Ethan. I opened the door, heart pounding. He looked different, older, weight of secrets on his shoulders. Beth, he said, sadness in his voice. I needed to see you. Talk. Hesitation, glancing back as if Richard might appear, but he wouldn't. Come in, I replied. Inside, Ethan looked around, familiar surroundings, a hidden world within these walls, a secret kept from Richard, myself. Now, walls felt smaller, secrets catching up. He turned, expression unreadable. I heard about Delia. She reached out weeks ago. Breath caught. Delia, she contacted you? He nodded, looking down. Asked for money, said she was starting fresh, needed help. I didn't give it. I've learned my lesson. Sympathy for him, drawn into Delia's web. What did you tell her? I was done with her games. Didn't want anything to do with her. He looked up, gaze searching mine. But Beth, I needed to see you. To tell you, I'm done with this too. Words hit hard. Inevitable, our affair a fleeting escape, reprieve from reality. Hearing him say it, final. I nodded, trying to keep voice steady. I understand. He reached out, brushing my hand. I want you to know, whatever happens, I'll always care. But we both know this can't go on. It was never real, not the way we wanted. A tear slipped down my cheek. I didn't stop it. He was right. What we shared was real, but also part of lies we'd lived. Time to let go. We said goodbye. Watching him walk away, relief, sorrow, free finally, but cost was high. With Ethan gone, Delia out of lives, Richard and I faced a blank slate. Stripped bare, nothing but each other, wreckage we'd created, no secrets left to hide. One evening, living room, Richard broke silence. We could start over, he said tentatively. Try to rebuild something. Won't be perfect, but maybe it doesn't have to be. Surprise, starting over seemed daunting, impossible, but his words sparked something. Maybe, I replied slowly, maybe we can try. Not love, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. After everything, we still had a choice. Stay, try again, even if pieces didn't fit. Slow, tentative rebuilding began. One day at a time, awkwardness, resentment, lingering ghosts. Not easy, days wondering if it was worth it. But each day, fragile trust grew. Faint glimmer, but enough. Months passed. Winter melted to spring. Lives took on new rhythm, quieter, subdued, peaceful. Clarity, acceptance from facing worse truths, surviving. Richard and I, never same people. Innocence gone, scars, hard lessons, but stronger, grounded. Tested, lives torn apart, but somehow back to each other. Not obligation, habit, but shared understanding. Seen each other's flaws, deepest weaknesses, chosen to stay anyway. Shadows always there, memories of what we'd done, lingering. But I learned to live with them, reminders of choices, consequences. Standing by window one evening, sunset, peace settled over me. Not happiness, but contentment. Quiet resilience. Weathered storm found way through. Richard joined me, hand slipping into mine. We stood in silence, two people bound by history, mistakes, choice to stay. Last light faded, I knew whatever lay ahead, we'd face it together.